In the green stillness of Northern California's backwoods, hidden behind whispering pine and crumbling logging roads, there once stood a village that called itself holy. No fences, no cars, just a scattering of log cabins, a community hall, shaped like an open hand, and hundreds of wind chimes swaying in the trees. Their music never stopped, not in the wind, not in the silence. The people who lived here called themselves the Children of Light. It began in 1971, during a cultural moment, already saturated with communes, counterculture, and New Age spirituality. This one, at first glance, seemed like just another peaceful retreat, a small, self-sufficient community seeking purity away from the noise of modern life. They grew their own food. They wore white. They believed in sound, not sound as a concept, but as a religion to them. Music wasn't just harmony, it was healing, prophecy, and law. Singing replaced speaking. Prayer was sung, not said, and those who couldn't sing were taught to listen in reverent silence. But to the casual visitor, the place appeared idyllic. Mothers moved slowly, like dancers underwater, humming lullabies, as they hung linen in the sun. Children chased each other barefoot through meadows, hair tangled with clover. There was laughter, sometimes, and always that gentle, ever-present melody, drifting through open windows, carried on handmade flutes and fragile voices. Photographs from the time show nothing sinister. In fact, they show what many longed for: serenity, the kind of slow, unplugged life that city dwellers fantasized about while trapped in traffic, a utopia of motherhood and music, a haven of peace, but still, something about the eyes. Look closely at those photos, you'll notice a pattern. The women are always in groups, their smiles almost identical. The men are always on the periphery, heads bowed. The children, beautiful, yes, but strangely quiet. Not a single photograph shows a child in mid-scream or mid. Not one is caught in mischief, one visitor. A local food inspector who made a routine delivery in 1974 later described the children as perfectly behaved in the wrong way. He said they walked in lines without being told. He said they sang in unison without needing to be cued. He said one little girl kept singing even after she tripped and bloodied her knee. He said none of them looked afraid, but none of them looked free. The cult, though they never called themselves that, had a hierarchy based on spiritual resonance. At the top were the mothers, or bearers of light. They had the most sacred duty to raise the next generation in complete sonic purity. That meant no outside music, no noise pollution, and no corruptive frequencies. Radios were forbidden, books were rare, language was simplified, rewritten, and often replaced with tones. The men, referred to as shadows, were mostly silent laborers. They worked the land, they built, but they did not lead. Leadership, in this strange inverted Eden, belonged to women, or more accurately, to mothers. It was a matriarchal dream turned inside out at the center of the commune. In the great hall there was a mural painted across the wooden walls. It showed a mother with open arms and light pouring from her throat like a sunbeam. Around her knelt dozens of children with closed eyes and serene faces. Above them floated musical notes like stars. It was called Return to the Song. Visitors were encouraged to leave quickly. Their presence distorted the frequency, the members would say, and besides, there was no room for outsiders in paradise. But paradise, as history has taught us, often comes at a price. The children of light claimed to reject modernity in the name of purity, but what they actually rejected was autonomy. Mothers did not own their children. Children did not own their voices. All was surrendered to the collective harmony. One early defector, a woman named Ruth Ellman, described it as a place where thinking was dissonance, where singing the wrong note was a sin, where silence wasn't peace, it was punishment. She left after just 4 weeks, claiming that every night she had dreams of drowning in lullabies. In time, the outside world stopped noticing the commune. Altogether, it was too remote, too gentle, too perfect. And besides, there were dozens of similar communities popping up around the country. No one had time to worry about one more group of flower-wearing idealists tucked in the hills. But as the 1970s crept into the 1980s, whispers began to surface. A missing child, a strange funeral with no body, women returning from the commune unable or unwilling to speak. A journalist from the Sacramento Herald attempted to investigate, but was turned away by a group of women in white who hummed in unison until he left. They weren't threatening. They didn't need to be by then. The music was doing the work, and behind the smiles, behind the songs, behind the wind chimes and wildflowers, something had begun to rot. The sound of serenity would soon give way to something darker, something that echoed far beyond the hills, and it all began with one man, a guitar, and a prophecy no one could stop singing. Ezekiel Marsh arrived like a melody haunting a forgotten song, a man whose presence seemed composed of both light and shadow. His eyes carried the weight of secrets and promises, promises whispered not in sermons but in chords. Before founding the Children of Light, Marsh was an obscure folk musician, drifting through smoky clubs and rural festivals, his songs quiet and unassuming. Yet behind that humble guise was a mind bent on transforming sound itself into an instrument of control and devotion. He claimed music was not mere art, but divine language, an ancient code that could bypass reason and implant truth directly into the listener's soul. His voice, when he sang, was hypnotic, neither harsh nor gentle, but balanced somewhere between lullaby and command. To his followers, every note was scripture, every melody a revelation. They hung on his every word, and soon his songs became the doctrine of the commune. Marsh dressed in flowing robes of faded indigo, his hair wild but strangely regal. His followers called him the voice of light, but his eyes revealed something far more complex, a man capable of both profound empathy and chilling calculation. He preached that true enlightenment came not through logic or debate, but through surrender to the song, to the rhythm that governed all life. His songs were deceptively simple, repetitive phrases, haunting refrains, words that at first sounded innocent words like follow the light, let go, let's sing, and the song is our breath. Yet embedded within the melodies were layers of suggestion, carefully crafted to dissolve doubt and reinforce obedience. Mothers, in particular, were the primary recipients of his teachings, chosen not by chance but by design. They were the bearers of life and, therefore, the bearers of the song's power. Marsh isolated his followers from the outside world slowly. He forbade radios, televisions, and any music not composed within the commune's circle. The songs became the heartbeat of their existence, sacred pulse that dictated daily routines, prayers, and even discipline. Mothers sang to their children, not just to soothe but to indoctrinate, their lullabies echoing the prophet's hymns. The music was a veil, soft and beautiful, concealing something far more sinister beneath. But Marsh's sermons did not always speak of peace. His prophecies often contained ominous undertones, cloaked in metaphor but impossible to ignore. Light demands sacrifice. He would sing during twilight gatherings, eyes gleaming with fervor. Only those who lay down their burdens will rise as pure. The congregation would sway in unison, their voices weaving a tapestry of hope and dread. Men in the commune were cast in shadows, both literally and figuratively, while women and children gathered in sunlit circles. Men were relegated to laborious tasks and rarely permitted to participate in the sacred songs. Marsh's doctrine elevated motherhood to a divine station, but it also stripped men of power, reducing them to silent guardians of the material realm inside the commune's main hall. The air was thick with incense and the low hum of voices raised in song. Marsh's figure stood at the center, strumming an old acoustic guitar that seemed almost sacred itself. Each chord he played sent ripples through the crowd, binding them tighter to the vision he painted, a world purified by sound, cleansed by obedience, and sanctified through the sacrifice of self. Yet even as the mothers hummed the prophet's melodies, shadows of doubt flickered behind their eyes. The songs demanded perfection, perfection that became increasingly impossible. As the melodies grew more insistent and the doctrines more severe, mothers found themselves caught between love for their children and loyalty to the song. The music blurred lines, lullabies morphed into commands, tenderness twisted into discipline. Whispers among former members revealed glimpses of Marsh's darker charisma. Some called him a visionary, others a madman cloaked in melody. Few could deny the magnetic pull he exerted. To question him was to face silence. To resist the song was to risk exile. But behind the beauty of his voice and the grace of his movements lurked a chilling ambition. Marsh was not merely a singer or preacher. He was a composer of minds, a maestro, orchestrating not notes, but obedience itself. As the sun set over the commune, the music swelled soft, mesmerizing, and impossible to ignore. In that moment, every mother who sang felt both divine and trapped, caught in a web woven from chords and silence. And so, the stage was set for a tragedy sung in minor keys, a tragedy where love, control, and madness would collide beneath the haunting melody of one man's vision. Sound is a powerful force. It shapes our emotions, tugs at memories, and can cradle us to sleep or jolt us awake. But in the hands of Ezekiel Marsh, music became something far darker, a weapon that slowly dismantled the very minds of his followers. Marsh's understanding of melody was not accidental. He studied the emerging science of auditory psychology, how repetition, rhythm, and tone could alter brainwaves and memory. He knew that repeated songs, sung in trance-like unison, could bypass critical thought and implant suggestion directly into the subconscious. His music was engineered for one purpose: to erase doubt and reshape identity. Mothers were his prime targets. The women who sang his hymns day and night found themselves slipping into a trance state, their minds echoing Marsh's melodies even in silence. Lullabies, once meant to soothe children, became mantras of obedience. Their lyrics softened commands. Let go, let's sing, the light calls, the light holds. Former members recalled the strange feeling of losing themselves in song, as if their own thoughts dissolved into the harmonic waves. It was like drowning in sound, one woman remembered. At first it was peaceful, but then I stopped knowing where I ended and the music began. The children learned to sing before they spoke. Their voices, pure and synchronized, carried the same hypnotic cadences that ruled the commune. Observers outside described the chorus as eerie, beautiful yet unnerving in its uniformity. The melodies didn't invite joy, they demanded submission. Isolation reinforced the effect. The community banned any outside noise. Radios, television, even casual chatter was discouraged unless it fit within the musical doctrine. Days passed in a fog of repeating refrains, sung during meals, work, and prayers. Silence itself was rare, filled instead by constant hums and chants. Psychologists studying cult indoctrination often cite repetitive chanting as a tool for brainwashing. But Marsh's approach was uniquely musical. His songs were complex in their simplicity, carefully crafted to appeal to the emotional centers of the brain while short-circuiting analytical thought. The melodies embedded commands, a form of auditory hypnosis. Sleep became another battlefield. Mothers reported nightmares where the same hymns replayed endlessly, warping into distorted echoes that haunted their dreams. Some awoke trembling, their minds caught between waking reality and the lingering grip of song. The song itself evolved over time. Early hymns spoke of peace and unity, but as Marsh's control tightened, the lyrics grew darker and more demanding. Words urging sacrifice, purity through suffering, and the sanctification of obedience began to weave into the music's fabric. One chilling lullaby, titled "Lay Her Down, Lay Him Still," repeated over and over in minor key, taught mothers that death was not an end but a return to light. The song was deceptively gentle, its melody soothing even as its message chilled. Music replaced language. Complex thoughts were pared down to simple refrains. Emotional bonds between mother and child twisted, filtered through the lens of song. Mothers were no longer nurturing individuals, but vessels for the prophet's will, their love refracted through melodies that demanded loyalty over life. The psychological consequences were devastating. Mothers lost sense of self, their identities melting into the chorus of the commune. Memory gaps, emotional numbness, and trance-like obedience became the norm. Some described moments of waking horror, brief flickers of clarity drowned by the relentless rhythm, even as the music claimed their minds. The mothers clung to a terrifying belief that their obedience was an act of love. They were convinced that through sacrifice, their children would transcend this world, and through song they would find salvation outside. The commune's eerie melodies were heard as faint echoes on the wind, beautiful, hypnotic, and chilling. The music was both bomb and chain, cradle and cage. It was the sound of innocence corrupted, a lullaby that lulled entire minds into submission and silence. As the songs grew louder and darker, the line between harmony and horror blurred. The stage was set for tragedy in the quiet heart of the commune. Motherhood was no longer an act of nurture, but a sacred, terrifying ritual rewritten by the prophet's doctrine. Ezekiel Marsh did not just teach songs, he rewrote the very meaning of what it meant to be a mother. According to Marsh, true motherhood transcended earthly attachment. The natural bonds between a mother and child, so cherished in the outside world, were described within the commune as chained sinful desires that kept souls tethered to darkness and doubt. Mothers were told their highest duty was to detach, to surrender not only their children's bodies but their very spirits to the light. Love was recast as a double-edged sword. It was holy only when purified through pain and sacrifice. The cult's hymns echoed this twisted theology. Mothers sang not of comfort but of cleansing. One haunting song, "Lay Her Down, lay him still, became a ritualistic mantra, teaching that death was not loss but release, a necessary passage back into the light. In this doctrine, the ultimate expression of motherhood was paradoxical. To love was to let go completely, even if it meant killing. The commune's mothers were urged to see their children not as fragile beings to protect, but as vessels to be purified. To the outside world, this was unthinkable. But inside the commune, this belief was gospel. Mothers spoke in hushed reverence of the sacrifice, a word heavy with both dread and divine promise. The line between mercy and murder blurred under the weight of this new theology. Women who struggled to accept this doctrine were labeled dissonant, a spiritual sickness that disrupted the harmony of the group. These mothers faced isolation, sometimes brutal discipline, and relentless pressure to conform. The communal music became a weapon to drown out their doubts, an endless chorus reminding them of their sacred duty. The children, too, were indoctrinated. Early, from birth, they were sung to with these hymns of purification. Their innocence was shaped not by lullabies of safety, but by chants that whispered of sacrifice and surrender. Mothers and children alike were trapped in a web of sound and belief, where love was measured in obedience and silence. This rewriting of motherhood shattered families from within. Mothers who once cradled their children with tenderness now held them with a hollow gaze. Their eyes, once warm, became distant pools, reflecting the cold doctrines that had invaded their souls. Survivors who escaped later described the surreal nature of parenting inside the commune. One woman recounted how her mother sang to her through the night, not to soothe, but to prepare her for a fate she could not understand, a fate promised in Marsh's chilling melodies. Marsh's vision was cruelly effective. The ideology dissolved. The natural maternal instinct, replacing it with a ritualized obedience that dehumanized both mother and child. In this perverse theology, love was a test of faith, one that demanded the ultimate sacrifice. The emotional tension was unbearable. Mothers loved their children deeply, yet that love was weaponized, twisted into an instrument of control. It created a psychological fracture, a desperate battle between instinct and indoctrination. The commune's music was the thread weaving this fractured tapestry. Every note reinforced the doctrine. Every chorus bound the women tighter to Marsh's will. In this way, music was not just a backdrop, but the very architecture of their broken reality. As the doctrine took hold, the once gentle lullabies hardened into dirges of obedience. Mothers who hesitated were shamed, and those who rebelled were broken down by relentless hymns. The community's rituals became exercises in submission, a perverse ballet of silence and song. This rewriting of motherhood set the stage for a dark transformation, one where the line between love and destruction would vanish, replaced by the chilling certainty that sacrifice was salvation. The next chapter would prove this terrifying doctrine was more than words and music. It was a deadly command. The first death within the commune was not announced with fanfare or sorrow. It passed like a shadow, whispered in half-truths and hushed songs. Ileana was 5 years old, with golden curls and wide eyes that once sparkled with innocent curiosity. To the outside world, she was just another child, raised among the trees and hymns of the children of light. But within the commune, Eliana became the first to embody the horrifying doctrine that had silently taken root. One morning, Eliana was found lifeless beneath a prayer rug in the small cabin she shared with her mother. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just stillness. The mother, a woman named Miriam, did not weep. She did not scream. Instead, she sat quietly, singing the sacred lullaby, "Lay Her Down." Lay him still, a chant that had become a ritualized acceptance of death as a return to the light. To the other mothers, Miriam was a beacon of faith, a paragon who had embraced the ultimate sacrifice. Officially, the commune declared Eliana's passing a return to source, a spiritual transition granted by divine will. No doctors were called, no outside authorities notified. The death was recorded as natural, an absence of sickness or injury to anyone outside. The scene would seem calm, even peaceful, but beneath that calm lay an unbearable tension. The silence was thick, a mute acknowledgement of the unspoken truth. Eliana's death was not an accident. Yet no one inside dared speak it aloud. Instead, they celebrated Miriam's devotion. Her song was sung in every corner, the community hall reverberating with the same chilling melody that had lulled Eliana in life and now comforted her in death. This event marked a turning point. The doctrine had evolved from abstract teaching into grim reality. The sanctity of motherhood, as redefined by Marcia's hymns, demanded not only emotional detachment, but physical sacrifice. The mothers began to view death as a form of mercy, an act of love rather than loss. To lay down a child was to release them from the imperfections and impurities of the material world, allowing their spirit to ascend into the light's embrace. Within the commune's walls, this logic became unassailable doctrine. Questioning it was to reject salvation itself. Mothers who hesitated were branded dissonant and subjected to communal penance, often involving repetitive chanting to purge doubt. Outside, the world remained ignorant. No investigation was launched. No family members intervened. The commune's isolation and secrecy protected it from scrutiny. This silence only emboldened the leadership and deepened the cult's grip. Miriam's quiet acceptance was both terrifying and emblematica chilling, testament to how far the cult had twisted love and faith into a tool for control. In the months that followed, Eliana's death was woven into the communal narrative as a sacred sacrifice, a necessary passage for all who sought true enlightenment. The song "Lay Her Down, Lay Him Still" became the anthem of this grim transformation, sung daily, with unwavering devotion. Yet beneath the surface, fear and sorrow festered in the hearts of some. Mothers whispered in secret, their voices trembling as they questioned the doctrine that demanded such a price. But fear of exile and relentless indoctrination silenced their doubts. Eliana's death was the first stone, cast into a dark pool, sending ripples that would drown the commune in tragedy. What began as a promise of harmony had mutated into a symphony of sacrifice, where death was no longer an end, but the final note in a twisted melody that would consume many more. As the years passed, the children of light faded from the view of the outside world, but their eerie melodies lingered in the air, haunting, persistent, and increasingly hollow. The once lively chorus of laughter and song began to dwindle, replaced by a growing stillness that unsettled anyone who happened upon the commune's shadowed borders, parents and neighbors outside. The commune noticed the change first. The children, once seen playing barefoot in sun-dappled meadows, no longer ventured beyond the fence. Playgrounds fell silent. Schoolyards knew fewer of their faces. The vibrant energy of youth was replaced with something colder, a haunting absence that no explanation could easily dispel. Inside, the songs continued, but they no longer carried joy. Instead, they were low, monotonous chants echoing through the forest, carried on the wind like ghosts of a forgotten hymn. To outsiders, the sound was both beautiful and unsettling. A spectral choir singing without passion or life. Former members, who managed to escape years later, described the commune as a prison of sound and silence intertwined. Mothers and children alike sang the prophet's hymns endlessly, their voices a tether to the collective will. But beneath the surface, a deeper silence reigned, one born of fear, loss, and resignation. The children's singing became a mask, concealing the pain and confusion beneath. Some spoke of nights when the melodies were interrupted by the muffled sounds of discipline, harsh whispers, sharp commands, even cries that were quickly stifled. The constant music served as both lullaby and veil, drowning out the reality of suffering. One survivor recounted how the communal singing sometimes felt like a suffocating fog, making it impossible to think or feel outside the prescribed harmony. It was as if the music had become a cage, she said. We were prisoners of a sound that demanded perfection, obedience, silence. The commune's isolation deepened as authorities began to take notice, spurred by reports from relatives and locals concerned about missing children and strange rituals. Investigations were slow and often thwarted by the commune's secrecy and the hypnotic defense of its members, who greeted outsiders not with hostility but with song. The authorities struggled to penetrate the veil. No evidence was easily found. The commune's daily life appeared peaceful, almost serene, but the silence between the songs spoke volumes. As rumors spread, former members whispered of a night known among them as the silent choir, a ritual where mothers and children gathered in the dark, voices muted, eyes downcast as if mourning, a loss too profound for song. This gathering was said to mark a tipping point, the moment when the music's power revealed its darkest purpose. Outside the commune, the community felt the chilling absence of the children's laughter and the hollow beauty of the women's songs. The voices that once promised light now whispered of shadow. The choir's silence was louder than any song. It spoke of lives lost, innocence stolen, and a harmony broken beyond repair. The stage was set for the unraveling, the exposure of a tragedy hidden beneath layers of melody and shadow. When the veil of silence was finally pierced, it was not by loud accusation, but by quiet, disbelieving shock. The trial of the mothers from the children of light. Commune began as a legal reckoning, but quickly became a trial of conscience, empathy, and the limits of justice itself. The courtroom was heavy with tension, the air thick as the accused. Women entered pale, distant, and humming softly beneath their breath. These mothers, once celebrated within their community as sacred bearers of light, now faced charges of murder. Not acts of rage or violence born from madness, but killings rooted in a twisted love, obedience to a doctrine that demanded sacrifice. Witnesses described mothers who sang the prophet's hymns during testimony, voices calm and unbroken, eyes glazed as if still trapped in the trance of song. Some recited verses from Lay Her Down, Lay Him Still, words chilling in their gentle cruelty. The court was captivated and horrified by their unwavering devotion to a music that had dictated their darkest acts. The prosecution laid bare the evidence, recordings of hypnotic chants, testimonies from survivors who spoke of losing their children not to accidents but to ritualized returns to the light. Yet the defense painted a different picture. Women as victims of psychological manipulation, trapped in a collective madness orchestrated by a charismatic prophet who had vanished before the trial began. Psychologists testified to the power. of auditory indoctrination, how repetitive music and ritual could erode free will, especially in isolated, vulnerable populations. But the jury struggled with the moral complexity. Could devotion excuse murder? Were these mothers killers or broken souls crushed by a cruel system? Public opinion was divided. Some saw the mothers as cold-blooded perpetrators who had betrayed their children. Others saw them as tragic victims, ensnared by a melody they could no longer resist. Media coverage oscillated between sensational headlines and somber reflections on cult dynamics. The mothers themselves rarely spoke beyond their hymns. When questioned, they often answered in song or cryptic phrases, their voices haunting the courtroom with echoes of a faith that transcended law. Their demeanor was neither remorseful nor defiant, but eerily serene. The absence of Ezekiel Marsh loomed large. The man who composed the doctrine, the songs, and the control had disappeared, leaving behind only his chilling music. Without his testimony, the case became a battle between belief and legality, faith and fact. Legal experts debated whether the mothers possessed true agency or were puppets of Marsh's auditory command. The court wrestled with establishing guilt. In a case where the lines between free will and coercion blurred beneath layers of melody, ultimately, some mothers were convicted, others acquitted. But the verdicts satisfied few. The trial raised profound questions about culpability, brainwashing, and the terrifying power of sound to warp the human mind. As the courtroom emptied and the mothers were led away, some singing softly, others silent, the world was left to grapple with a tragic paradox. Women who loved deeply, yet obeyed a doctrine that led them to kill. The music that had once promised salvation had become the instrument of destruction, and the echoes of their voices would haunt justice long. After the gavel fell, Ezekiel Marsh, the enigmatic architect of the Children of Light, never stood trial. He vanished long before the first court proceedings began, slipping away like a fading note at the end of a haunting song. His disappearance was as mysterious as his rise, leaving behind only fragments of cryptic sheet music, fragmented journals, and a legacy carved into the minds of those he left behind. No one knew exactly where he went. Some whispered he retreated into the forest, swallowed by the very shadows that once cloaked his commune. Others believed he had simply vanished from the mortal world, becoming one with the light he so often sang about. A few suspected darker fates, betrayal, murder, or even escape to some distant place where his influence could continue. His absence was a ghost that haunted every trial, every investigation. Without him, there was no clear authority, no direct confession, no tangible command linking him explicitly to the crimes. Prosecutors struggled to build a case against the mothers without the man who composed their obedience. Marsh's silence became a paradoxical statement in itself. It was louder than any confession, more chilling than any denial. In courts, in whispered conversations, and in survivor testimonies, his name carried a weight of dread and unseen presence, orchestrating horrors from the shadows. The only remnant of his control was the music, the hymns, the lullabies, the chants that had bound the commune in a web of sound and obedience. Those melodies persisted, etched into memory and culture, their notes both beautiful and malevolent. Without Marsh's voice to counterbalance, questions swirled. Was he a prophet or a madman? A visionary or a manipulator? The ambiguity deepened. The tragedy, leaving a haunting uncertainty that no verdict or testimony could resolve, even today. The sheet music he left behind is studied by psychologists and cult experts, a chilling artifact illustrating how melody can become a tool of domination. Some believe the music itself carries an almost supernatural power, kind of sonic virus that infects the mind and will. Marsh's silence ensured. His legend endured, a spectre hovering over the ruins of the commune and the shattered lives of those it consumed. In that silence, the music became a ghostly echo, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous words are the ones never spoken. And as the world moved on, the question remained, could the man who disappeared in silence still be composing the next verse in a song no one can hear? The commune's collapse left a silence heavier than any hymn. When the authorities finally stepped through the forested gates and into the shadowed cabins, they found a place frozen in time walls, still adorned with faded murals of mothers, bathed in light, the scent of incense lingering like a ghost, and a chilling absence of the children who once filled the meadows. Survivors emerged as fragile spectres, their voices quiet but haunted. Mothers, once carriers of the prophet's song, now struggled to reclaim fragmented memories and shattered identities. Many bore deep scars, psychological wounds inflicted by years of indoctrination, isolation, and loss. Their love, once weaponized, had been twisted beyond recognition. Outside the commune, families grieved for the missing children, most of whom were never found. Investigations uncovered evidence of ritualized deaths, but many questions remained unanswered. How many had been lost to the light? How many survived but remained trapped in silence? The broader community recoiled at the revelation. Stunning betrayal, cloaked in melody and motherhood. Media outlets dubbed it the cult of the lullaby, highlighting the grim paradox of women who nurtured with song yet embraced death. Psychologists studied the aftermath with fascination and horror. The Children of Light became a case study in the devastating power of auditory manipulation and the fragility of human autonomy under duress. The cult's story became a warning, dark lesson in how love, twisted by fanaticism and music, can become a weapon of destruction. Communities across the country re-evaluated how they viewed spiritual movements and the vulnerability of isolated groups. Laws on cult activities, child welfare, and psychological abuse were scrutinized and, in some cases, strengthened. Yet, despite the legal and cultural reckoning, the emotional fallout continued to ripple. Survivors grappled with guilt, grief, and the crushing weight of lost childhoods. Families faced the impossible task of rebuilding relationships severed by years of silence and trauma. The music, once the commune's sacred core, remained a haunting symbol echoing through therapy sessions, courtrooms, and memory. Attempts to preserve or erase it sparked fierce debate. Could something so beautiful also be so deadly? Artists and writers explored the story, capturing its tragic complexity in books, films, and songs. But no depiction could fully capture the eerie dissonance between love and cruelty, harmony and horror. The legacy of the Children of Light is a fractured melody, one that resonates with pain, warning, and an uneasy fascination. It reminds us that darkness often hides behind beauty, and that the human mind, even when wrapped in song, can become a cage. As the last echoes fade, the question lingers: how do we remember those lost in the silence between the notes? How do we honor the innocence, shattered by a melody that promised salvation but delivered sorrow? The Children of Light's story does not end with closure, but with haunting resonance, a warning that beneath every song there may be shadows waiting to be heard. Music is the heartbeat of humanity, a universal language that transcends borders, cultures, and generations. It can inspire revolutions, soothe wounded souls, and forge connections between strangers. But beneath its beauty lies a shadowy power, a tool that can be wielded to manipulate minds and bend wills. The legacy of the Children of Light commune reveals this darker side, a haunting reminder that melody is never innocent. Long after Ezekiel Marsh disappeared, his hymns did not fade into obscurity. Instead, they took on a life of their own through underground forums, whispered among secretive groups, and studied by psychologists who labeled the phenomenon the Marsh effect. This term describes how certain melodies, through repetition, rhythm, and emotional resonance can erode critical thought and create deep psychological imprinting. The Marsh effect is now a subject of serious research. Experts examine how music can bypass rational defenses, implant suggestions, and even alter perceptions of reality. While not inherently sinister in the wrong hands, this power becomes dangerous a weapon cloaked in harmony. In the digital age, the cult's songs have found new life. Online communities dissect the melodies, praising their haunting beauty and intricate structures. Some claim to find profound meaning and even spiritual comfort in these tunes, oblivious or indifferent to their sinister origins. Others warn against their use, fearing the lingering grip of Marsh's sonic influence. This tension between beauty and danger, allure and harm raises profound questions. Can a song be evil if it is beautiful? Can melody seduce the mind into darkness even as it enchants the ear? The Children of Light story forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that art is never neutral. Beyond cults, music's power is harnessed in marketing, politics, and even warfare. Advertisers use catchy jingles to implant brands in memory. Politicians employ stirring anthems to galvanize support. Militaries experiment with sonic tactics designed to disorient and demoralize. The legacy of the Children of Light is a chilling precursor to these modern manipulations. Yet, amid the warnings and research, music remains a source of hope and healing. Survivors of the commune and their therapists emphasize reclaiming music as a force for restoration, choosing songs that soothe, empower, and reconnect individuals with their own voices. The final note of this story is not one of despair, but of vigilance. The haunting lullabies of the Children of Light remind us to listen carefully, not just to the sounds themselves, but to the intentions behind them. As the screen fades to black, a soft, eerie lullaby plays its melody beautiful, unsettling, and endlessly repeating. It is a song without end, a warning carried on the wind. Can a song be evil if it's beautiful? Perhaps the answer lies not in the music alone, but in the silence we choose to break between its notes.